Good evening. Welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith, and Liam Kennedy from the Shields Gazette. And both of us wondering whether we should have even done this show tonight after the way that Twitter's gone into meltdown in the last 50 minutes. It's been absolutely mental, hasn't it?
It has, crazy. Yeah, obviously there's been certain developments, there's certain leaks elsewhere, and talk of rival bids, and I suppose we'll try and talk this through and make some sense of it for everybody out there.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get a lot of questions. So what we'll do is we will go through them. And Danielle's straight in. She says, right, lads, it's all going off. Luke Edwards is saying it's Clear TV wanting to buy us, not Mauriss directly. Also saying that there was a deadline in the contract with PIF. So now it's a race for Premier League clearance. Yeah, let's start with that. I mean, deadlines, etc., don't really count, do they, when money's being paid up front and they've got exclusivity, and we're led to believe there was no real date on that. This attempt to buy the club by PCP, the Rubens and PIF will come to an end, I suppose, if there was no finance transferred or if the Premier League knocked it back.
Yeah, very much so. I think there seems to be like a growing narrative among Newcastle fans. I see it on social media that the Premier League are keen to just sweep this under the carpet, or they're hoping for somebody to make an excuse so that they can reject this bid. I know it sounds a bit daft, but I did put that question to them yesterday, just saying, can you allay fans' fears almost? Because I know there's been criticism that the media aren't doing enough on speaking to the Premier League enough, on hassling and harrying as they should be. But I'll let you know out there that I'm constantly on to them, but there's very little that they can say officially anyway. And the answer that I got back was a very straight answer, that they really cannot talk about any part of this process. I wasn't asking for specifics. I thought I might have got some kind of steer on that, but they're not. They're keeping their cards close to their chest, and really so they probably should, because they don't have to be responsible to the media on this. Ultimately, the Premier League are only answerable to the member clubs, the 20 member clubs, and I think they are doing that. Although, to be honest, I think people at Newcastle United could know a little bit more and probably should as well.
Yeah, Terry Ross says the Chronicle at it again, saying the deal stalled, and definitely at some stage the circus will end. The Premier League need to decide and give the reason for the decision. The fake reports must stop. I mean, my research and chats with a few people today, hasn't really harvested a great deal of information. I've got to be perfectly honest, but I do feel that the atmosphere around this whole takeover is reaching boiling point, and I still believe we will get some kind of answer by this weekend. I think that the end of the season is the right time for the Premier League to come out and say something, and hopefully they will have all their ducks in a row. They will have ticked all the boxes. They will have seen everything that they need to see from PCP and PIF and the Rubens, and make their decision so that we can then either move on or welcome the new owners. And it's as simple as that.
Yeah, I concur on that, Steve. Your information, as is mine as well, that the questions asked have all been answered effectively. But what we don't know is all those answers, the answers that the Premier League want and need to be able to say yes or no. They've got the answers and they need to say yes or no. That's the problem. They need to make a decision. We've all been waiting a long time. Buyers, sellers. Mike Ashley's as frustrated as anybody. If you speak to anybody who's in close relations with him, and everybody wants a decision on this. It needs to come, and like you said, it is getting to the point where I think we probably will get one at some point. But again, putting timeframes on it, I've been stung. There's been a lot of other people stung. It's difficult to say it'll happen X, Y, and Z. I don't know when it'll happen, but we definitely need an answer. This is, like I said before, this isn't something that the Premier League can sweep under the carpet. It's not. It wouldn't be right to do so. And whether that's with another bid coming in potentially, and they can accept another one on top of it. That's not the way these things work. These things don't work like that. There's been a deposit paid, and we're in the process well down the line with this bid. So we will get a decision, I would hope.
Yeah, Dom Sprawlin says, evening lads, what do you make of how the media report portrayed Steve Bruce to be the saviour of Newcastle? As a supporter, I struggle to see how they've painted this picture of him. Yeah, I know you were, you were watching this with amusement like I was last night. I mean, Sky's selection of Graham Souness and Kieran Dyer, in the studios last night was absolutely par for the course, I've got to say, with Sky. But yeah, there is a narrative by the national media. I wouldn't say the local media. I think the local media are giving a good account, but there seems to be a lot of pushing Steve Bruce to the forefront, bigging him up. We've had this ongoing comparison between him and Rafa, and I mean, Kieran Dyer's touch of amnesia last night, suggesting that this is the highest, best place finish for a long time is crazy, isn't it? It's just constantly backing Steve Bruce, and I don't understand it.
Look, I think you've just got to deal with the facts, and the facts are that he brought the word stagnation into the argument, and have Newcastle move forward or backwards? I think you could argue that they've probably slightly gone backwards. It hasn't been a positive season. It's been really, really difficult to watch. Anybody who's watched Newcastle United this season, you don't have to go back too far. You only have to look back to January, the Oxford game, a couple of others as well. It was painful. So to paint Steve Bruce out as being absolutely perfect, the best thing since sliced bread this season, we all know that isn't the case. But has he done okay? Yeah, he's done okay. I'm not going to say he's been the worst manager I've ever had, because he isn't, but he certainly isn't. He's very, very far from the best. And the comparisons with Rafa Benitez are pathetic, really. They just shouldn't happen. We're all sick of them, but we all know that there isn't really a comparison as well.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. Sean Foreman says, which forward from the past would choose to play in the current team if they were still playing today other than Shearer? He would go for Mickey Quinn. God, it's a tough one. Yeah, Soles is a close second best. I suppose we need somebody who's going to work, because with the exception of St. Maximin and maybe Matt Ritchie, there's not a great deal of service going into the strikers, even though the strikers aren't top class. So you need someone who's going to be able to do a little bit of graft themselves. Maybe it's Andy Cole for me. So yeah, Les Ferdinand and Andy Cole, Sean. I hope that answers your question. Sam says, being positive all the way through the situation, but I'm fully convinced it won't go through now. A lot of people are feeling like that. I'm not. I've got to be honest. I'm still feeling positive. John Allen says, evening guys. Hi mate. He's Rafa Benitez quite simply doesn't like Luke Edwards. Look, Luke's a journalist and he's a bloody good one. I've had complete, disagreements with Luke online. I tend not to follow him these days on Twitter, only because my timeline gets full of. He'll get sick of me advertising my events. I get sick of seeing a lot of his negative comments, and then I get dragged into it. And I've ended up dragged into one no matter half an hour ago. Liam posted an article, and then Luke got dragged into it, and suddenly all of these comments are appearing on the timeline. But look, he's a journalist. Has an opinion, he's got his sources. For me, he's a big Steve Bruce fan, which means that I'm not going to agree with him because I'm not a big Steve Bruce fan. But he's a good journalist, and I understand some people won't like the way that he writes. I think hate's a strong word, so I wouldn't endorse that. And I'm sure you would agree, Liam. I saw your reply to somebody pop at him earlier on.
100%. He's a respected journalist. Has been on the Northeast Beach for a long time. I respect him from his years gone by at the Journal and times like that. I think he's a fantastic journalist. I get on with him. And to be honest, it's okay to have different views. Everyone's got different sources, different opinions. And Luke's the type who puts his head above the parapet. We're not always going to agree on things. Neither are Newcastle fans, but like you said, I think hate's a little bit strong. It's just a game.
Yeah. Colin Wilson says, hi, lads. To be fair, Liam is a top journalist. Luke Edwards is a top journalist, as you said in your tweet earlier. But do you think he gets up in the morning thinking, what can I do and what can I tweet today to get the Geordies biting because it works well? Maybe, yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a little bit of that. We all get sometimes up on a morning, maybe get out the wrong side of bed or the right side of bed and maybe put something up there. I know that I'll put a few cryptic tweets out every now and then. And, sometimes I do it just because that's the way I'm feeling. Other times I do it because you do want a little bit of reaction, and sometimes it just gets you off to a good start when you maybe replying to 20 different people who are all having a pop at you. But that's what Twitter is. You've got to learn Twitter etiquette, haven't you, Liam?
I certainly have. It's a very different place to operate. It's not the type of pub conversations. It's not the type of conversations you have with normal people. Sometimes it can be daft. It can be funny. It's got its positives. It's got its negatives. We've all been there. on Luke, yes, I think, like I said before, I think he puts his head above the parapet, and I think he sticks by his sources, he sticks by his stories, and there's nothing wrong with that as well. I don't think he's deliberately on the wind up, to be honest, most of the time. But I think there is an element of that, and I think that's just the person, isn't it? Everybody's different.
Yeah. Peter Robson, probably echoing the way a lot of people are feeling. We're in a truly horrible place if Bruce and Ashley are still here next season. I've supported the club for near on 40 years, and this regime has caused me more stress and heartache than any other. Yeah, I would agree with you, Peter. It's a sad state of affairs. Christopher says, Daily Mirror article from Simon, a big nothing burger, not worth the paper it's printed on. It's all about opinions. James says, Luke's acting up, No, not him. Jason says, good evening from Stuttgart, Germany. I slept great last night. The game was a great help. Yeah, it wasn't the greatest of games, was it, Liam? I mean, no. You kindly invited me, Steve Hasty and Neil Mitchell on to be your pundits, and it was a difficult one to cover because it was a bore fest, really, wasn't it? Neither team really, trying their best to win it.
Well, thank you. I'm really pleased I did invite you guys on because you all kept me awake with your comments, laughing. We went from Sabutio references to Flat Earth, as we had all sorts in the blog last night. So it was a good laugh, to be honest, but a lot more interesting than what we were watching on the telly anyway.
Yeah, it was. Let's talk about Henry Mauriss, because obviously that's what's caused a lot of the fallout today on Twitter. And, this guy has been hovering around, this takeover for the last few months now. And it's not the first time he's been mentioned, of course. And a lot of skepticism around it, Henry Mauriss. But I think what's interesting about the whole situation is that he hasn't gone away. There are reports in the media that Mike Ashley has been talking to him. Mike Ashley, as we know, is in America. Mauriss is in America. Different reports suggest that it's his TV channel which would look to buy Newcastle. Research into the background of Mauriss doesn't bode well for the future because there seems to be a lot of things surrounding him and a lot of people surrounding him who maybe look a little bit doubtful as to whether they would pass a proper fit and proper persons test with the Premier League. And of course, if the Premier League decide to reject, the PCP, PIF, Reuben bid, anytime soon, and Mauriss comes into the driving seat, does that not put us right back to the start of this whole process again, which means that we could end up with another 3 to 4 months of waiting around for the Premier League to get that backside in gear?
Well, if you look at it, we could well end up in that position. It is possible. You can't rule that kind of thing out. It would be depressing for a lot of Newcastle fans if this Saudi bid was to be rejected, which we all pray it isn't going to be, and believe it isn't going to be. It would be almost like having that winning lottery ticket and then losing it. I think that's how Newcastle United fans would feel on Henry Mauriss. This was a name mentioned me back, I would say, probably just after Christmas, maybe the start of January. And my first looks into him were very sketchy. He's a man with such a small digital footprint that almost it brings up red flags almost in your own due diligence. But there has been PR companies this year getting in touch with people in the area. May well have been yourself as well, Steve, but I've been contacted by some and have been doing due diligence for other parties. And I think what this Henry Mauriss thing to me proves is that we are definitely in the Mike Ashley endgame. So whether the Saudi bid goes through or not, which again I hope it does, I believe Mike Ashley now, there have been doubts in the past whether he really wanted to sell. This is a massive inconvenience to him now. His baby, Sports Direct, Fraser's Group, whatever you might want to call it, is having its struggles. And that's what's made him the man that he is today. And I don't think he wants to see that struggle. He sort of saw Newcastle as a little bit of an annoyance. It is a major insignificance now. He needs it gone. And I think we will see it gone. Will it be 3 or 4 months down the line? Again, timeframes are just impossible to say, but it would really be quite something for Newcastle fans out there to wake up tomorrow and find out they've been rejected. But I do believe it will be sold. He is a willing seller now, which even myself, I've had big doubts over the last 2 or 3 years whether he really was a willing seller. Yeah,
Henry Mauriss not really endearing themselves to Newcastle fans of, I would say a majority of Newcastle fans by saying that if he comes in, he'll give Bruce a chance. Jesus. Alan Davis says the EPL are a disgrace. They have placed the club and the fans in a state of paralysis. What does TV rights have to do with it? O&D test. It's about fitting proper board members being able to run a football club. Well, here, Alan. Paul Oxley, it's an absolute joke this now. If we don't get taken over, then that's my finish with Newcastle. A lot of people saying that. Peter Robson, if it's a no, then we have a dying club on our hands. Yep. James Griffiths, KSA blocking BN is the thing that will kill it off. It's all about opinions. James says, can't wait for Newcastle to be a club with ambition, that hope and love for our club can be restored. Next comment, Kieran, if this Saudi bid is rejected, my affiliation with the club is done. I can't do this anymore. Mauriss sounds like a chancer as well. Adam Anderson, once the league is done and dusted, maybe we'll get more news on the takeover front. I take it all. Tom, evening, mate. Paul says, whoever takes Newcastle over, other than the Saudis, we aren't going to be really any better than now. Anton Mackay says, so last week was an article saying Mauriss is on a charm offensive, then this week suddenly we can now rival the Saudi bid. Surely it's too far along, just waiting on a yes or no. Yeah, I mean, the Mauriss thing just interests me, and I said this when he first reappeared on the scene. For me, it really looks, it does look as if it's got Keith Bishop's fingerprints all over this.
Yeah, it could be. I think you're not alone in thinking that. It's the timing. If you've been interested in a football club, which we're led to believe he's been interested in buying this football club since last year, possibly November, October last year, then why all of a sudden wait to make your move when another bidder has got to the point where they're effectively waiting for a yes or no and then to transfer the funds? The timing is the thing that made a lot of people wary. And I think, again, this idea that he's on a charm offensive is another one. Is this a hurry up to the people that need to make the decision? It certainly will sort of sharpen a few minds, especially if they're about to be presented with a potential other bid. But for me, until there is a bid accepted by Mike Ashley from Henry Mauriss, and there are the relevant checks, relevant paperwork all submitted, I don't see why this is in any way, shape or form relevant. It isn't relevant until effectively we know yes or no on the Saudis as well. So to me, it's a story, and I do believe it's true. I do believe there is something in it. There's a lot of people with a lot of respect, big hitters in the industry in the Northeast at least, saying that it is happening and it is a bid. Then I believe it, to be honest. I don't believe these people are getting strung along by Keith Bishop necessarily, but I also sympathise with people who believe it could well be.
Yeah, 100%. Gary says, my confidence has always been positive, but I have to admit these journos are putting doubt in my mind. Well, yeah, I mean, it's all about opinions. And, if you read Liam's stuff in the Shields Gazette, he's tried to be a little bit more positive, but also more honest. He does a lot of research, Liam. That's why we've asked him to come back on tonight and have a read of his articles on the Shields Gazette website. Doug says, how can all these newspapers fill all their pages when there's a non-disclosure clause? Everything has got to be speculation only. Yeah, a point I've made for a long time, all the way through this process. And ultimately that is the case. Nobody really knows. People will be getting snippets from this one and that one on both sides of the fence. Both companies have PR companies that work for them, who will, I'm sure, have a social life, may go out, may speak to somebody who they rely on and trust, who then may whisper something to somebody else, and that's the way it works. Football works like that. Chris says, the owners and directors test must be separated from the being rights issue. The Premier League should be able to say that the ODT has been passed, but still work to do on the being rights. Yeah, I mean, if some of our fans were working at the Premier League, this would have all been sorted out a lot quicker, I think. Michael Barrymore, hope you're well. Logic of the takeover goes through. Let's get a top manager to push this club on media. Just let Steve Bruce manage the richest sports team in the world for the crack. I saw a comment there before as well, saying that Bruce has got a lot of friends in the media, which is true. But if you ask them, would you like Steve Bruce to manage your team, Man United or Liverpool or Man City? I bet they wouldn't welcome him with open arms there.
No, I think it's one of those, isn't it? Like if it wasn't Mike Ashley and had to be in the Saudis last summer and Rafa Benitez walked away, would they have appointed Steve Bruce? And the answer to that is a very big no. So I think it's fair to have that opinion. That doesn't necessarily have to be personal. It's not a dislike of Steve Bruce. No. It's just a recognition that he isn't probably a standard that we would have chosen to replace someone like Rafa Benitez or to manage Newcastle United Football Club. I just want to go back on a comment there that we had about NDAs as well. non-disclosure agreements can be very specific. So it's not always the case that you have to shut up shop if you know about this. It's not always the case. It can be about like financial specifics and things like that. So you can't disclose certain things about a deal, and you can't disclose certain things. You're basically party to the club opens the books, for example, to you to examine. Now, the reason why I sign an NDA is so that you don't then go out and start telling everybody about all the in and ins and outs of that football club. NDAs can be very much about that. So that doesn't necessarily present challenges when talking to people for certain parties. And you're always, like you said, always going to get leaks from certain people. And that has been the case. Let's not lie about it. That there's been leaks left, right and centre throughout this process. And to be honest, as a journalist, that's not a bad thing.
No, definitely not. Josh says he said we haven't stagnated. This is Steve Bruce. He wants to keep moving the club forward. Then in the next breath says he would have took 44 points at the start of the season, less than last season. He confused me constantly. Yeah, it is something which he's not very good at, unfortunately, is media work. I've got to be perfectly honest. And it's never impressed me that we've gone from Rafa, and I'll chuck a comparison because everybody else does it. Rafa, who's very cool, calm and collected, very methodical, gives a lot to journalists, played the game, battled with Ashley quite well, which got the supporters on side, very early on. But what he says is, he speaks a lot of common sense. And sadly, we've gone to Steve Bruce, who, through no fault of his own, just the way he was brought up, maybe his education, God knows, but he's just not great with words. And, he stutters and stammers, and, he doesn't get the message across clearly. And sometimes saying less is more, you know what I mean? If you just think about what you're going to say, and like Josh says, mixed messages, Liam, sometimes drives the fans up the wall as well.
I can see the frustration because I spoke to Steve on Saturday morning, and he said certain things about. It was quite refreshing to see him almost change the narrative, because he'd been criticised in the week with regards to some of his comments about where the club should be, and we're only a few points behind a good side like Southampton. We should be happy with this. And he almost, I thought, on Saturday, tried to change that narrative and almost said, we shouldn't be happy with a mid-table finish as Newcastle United in the Premier League. That shouldn't be something we just accept. Almost saying, agreeing with us, how we feel. He is black and white as well. And I thought, maybe he realises he's probably got his words wrong here. But then to hear what he said again last night about basically saying, I would have took 44 points if he'd offered me this at the start of the season. Yes, I do get that as well, because he came into a club in absolute turmoil after Rafa Benitez left. No players have been signed. The club had just been beaten in China. Look, they were all over the shop. But to say that after your comments on Saturday, it just looks like you're flip-flopping around. You don't really know quite what the message is. And it would be nice to see him stick to a particular message. He's black and white. He knows what he should do, and he doesn't have any need in particular to sort of pander to the people above him, especially not like when I said, whether it's the Saudis or whether it's Clear TV, whether it's anybody, I don't believe Mike Ashley will be the owner of this football club for too much longer.
No, which is a reason to celebrate, just as long as it's going to somebody who can make a difference and take it to the next level, which is what Mike Ashley was, saying, a few, years ago when he did that, interview with Sky with David Craig, that you'd only sell it to somebody who could take it to the next level. By all accounts, Mauriss or Clear TV, at this moment in time, don't look as if they can do that. In fact, it looks as if we're just going to have the American version of Mike Ashley, which isn't a great thing. B. Taylor has a question for you there. He says, Master stated 3 weeks ago that he hoped this takeover would be concluded shortly. Did he indicate to you how long shortly was in mind?
Obviously, I wasn't part of that conversation at all, but I've been questioning the Premier League on this on almost every couple of days, just trying to get some kind of update, some kind of clarity, and it's not something they're given. I do believe it's really difficult for everybody because we're picking up on every single thing that somebody says. Sometimes people can be put on the spot, and it's the semantics of the conversation. And I think when he said shortly, I think we're probably reading a little bit too much into that. I think he was just effectively saying, we will make a decision on this and we hope it's soon. I don't think he was necessarily saying with that word shortly, even though we took it to be such, that it would be shortly, if you know what I mean. I think it's difficult because we do read a lot into every single word, and it's only right, having been put through the mill for so long with this takeover and Mike Ashley, that we do hang on everybody's word. I just think people like Richard Masters, I think he's also stumbled a little bit with some of his things that he said, and I think given the gravity of the situation, I think people have just got to be quite clever with their words, particularly people in positions of power such as Richard Masters.
Yeah, a lot of people asking if I'm still 100%. Yes. And I think you've heard there as well from Liam, he's still 100% that it's going to happen, that Mike Ashley will leave the building. And I still believe that the Saudi bid is the one that will get put through. But they've taken so much time. I think that's the most frustrating thing. And, we're being bombarded with completely different media stories week in, week out, different takeovers and, different reasons for it not to happen. And, all we've done, Liam, I know, has it, the paper, I have, Steve Hasty has, Neil Mitchell has, is try just to keep a level head on it and just try to report what we see as the fact. So hopefully that's helped everybody, and hopefully we will have an end game, hopefully by the weekend. It would be great. Lee says, I've said from day one about Richard Masters, is he changing the rules? Will there be a legal challenge if it gets turned down? I mean, we'll presume there will be if it gets turned down for something that they can complain about.
Yeah, I've been led to believe that there will be a legal challenge. It was that was laid out to me quite some time ago, that there would be a legal challenge should this be rejected. I just want to go over the stuff from last week. There's been positive and negative taken with regards to the blocking of beIN. The people I've spoken to within the kingdom have suggested to me that this was very much a move, as I wrote in the story last week, that they want Saudi TV company to effectively show the Premier League, should they be given the green light to buy one of the stakeholders in the Premier League. And I can see total logic in that. What I made clear in the story, I'm not a takeover happy clapper. I'm not going to tell everybody it's 100% going to happen, or the Saudis are 100% going to do this, that, and the other. But what I'm led to believe is that is their plan, that's their ethos, that's the way they're deciding to go about things. Whether the Premier League decide that's right for them as well is another thing altogether. And the thing about all of this is, with regards, whether it's what I say, whether it's what Steve says, whether it's what Luke Edwards says, Miguel Delaney, could be anybody. There's only a select few people who really know what decision is going to be made and which way this is leaning. And I'm sure we'll find out soon enough. I really hope that that narrative that's growing on Tyneside, that the Premier League are going to sweep this under the carpet, it doesn't happen. And I've got faith that it will not happen. And like I said, I think we're coming to the end, and we've all just got to hang on.
Yeah,
it is hard, isn't it? It's hard to do that, but everyone's just got to keep the faith.
Sam, I get on with Simon Bird. He's another good lad. Haven't seen him for a while, but he's another good journalist. Liam, I'm sure it's the same for you.
Yep.
Jason says, Liam, could you give my regards to my old school pal, Gareth Crickmer? He's been at the Gazette for years. We lost touch years ago. I hope he's doing well.
Oh, I'll pass on, yeah.
John Oliver, I'm sure he must. This must be the name you use when you dress up as a woman, Liam. We all do it every Friday, of course. Liam, are you confident that the Saudis will get the deal done?
Yes, very much so.
Yes. Rafa Benitez has got Henry fake, but more like, yes, he doesn't believe that Henry Mauriss is real. John says, can't see anything coming out before Sunday now, surely. Henry Mauriss is a red herring. Far too much been said about him already. Sit tight for a verdict. I'm 100% sure it will be the one that we want. Great. Good positive text there. Colin says, if Mike Ashley could get an extra 50 million from another party, do you not think he would have tried to pull the plug on the PIF deal by now? Yeah, it doesn't work like that, because the deal's done, isn't it, Liam? The deal is done, and as long as there's no problems with PIF and PCP and the Rubens, then the exchange of finances will see them with their name above the door.
That's the thing about we've all got to remember, is that Mike Ashley wanted this deal done in April. He wanted it gone. He's given up on Newcastle United emotionally. He's given up. Well, I'm not sure he ever had much emotion invested ever, but if he didn't care before, he really doesn't care at all now. So I do think, like I've said, I'll keep repeating myself. He's gone. He is gone. We've just got to hope it's the Saudis that get the green light. And like you said, though, there's been a deposit paid. Everything has been agreed. talk of Henry Mauriss doesn't really become even close to relevant until he's agreed a deal in principle. For example, should the Saudis be rejected by the Premier League, there is no suggestion yet that has even happened. There's only been this talk of 350 million for a club that's valued at 300, which was another red flag for all of us, really.
Yeah. The point here by Kirk's great. On the 29th of June, Henry Mauriss was linked to BN and Document. By the way, his business turned over 7.5 million last year. So where does he get 350 million from? I mean, that kind of thing is why we all think it's a red herring, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, he probably cut open the mattress, I think, and it'll be all in there.
It's the Premier League, not the English Premier League. Yeah, there's a lot of, as I say, we know there's a lot of geopolitics going on. We know that there's a lot of that being going on around this, and it's something we're completely, not used to at all. Kieran says, if the Saudi bid's rejected, my affiliation with the club is done. Can't do this anymore. Maurice sounds like a chancer as well. Adam says, once the league is all done and dusted, maybe we'll get more news on the takeover front. Well, that's what we're hoping for, isn't it?
Well, we've thought that because we thought, right, well, maybe now they've got Project Restart up and running, we'll get an answer. It didn't come. Maybe now when that Project Restart's done, we'll get an answer. I think it's hopeful, but it's wishful thinking as well. We've got no idea whether there will be an answer or not then. I know you're really hopeful that there will be. I'm keeping my cards close to my chest on this one. I'm not putting me neck out there on this one.
No, you cannot afford to do that. Tom says, Liam, do you think the takeover would have been done now if we hadn't had the COVID situation?
It's interesting because we're led to believe at the start of this situation that it was something that was really holding the deal up. Obviously, it hasn't helped matters. Just the logistics of having people in different places, not being able to sort of get around a table and sort things out. Has made it difficult, but I've been told that it hasn't really been a massive hold up. I think the problem with this has more been that we are talking about the Saudi state effectively, not officially, but effectively buying a football club. And obviously the geopolitics and the ongoing conflict with Qatar has really, really developed. And you've got to remember that the Qataris already have their foot in the door because they have the TV rights. So the Premier League in some ways are having to make sure that they stand by their rights holder. They've done that through the court, try to get it through the courts a few times. And also the Premier League's major sponsor is Barclays as well. So there are interest there. It's a challenging situation. I think that's more been the delay than COVID, even though that's put everybody's life on hold. I do think it was significant initially, but to be honest, I think the political issues have really overtaken that in recent months.
Yeah, Jason says Maurice has reportedly been done for fraud, but we'll say allegedly. So he fails the fit and proper test before it even starts. Bizarre. Joe says, Steve Liam, are you starting to get bored of this now? PIF will happen. Yeah, is the honest answer for me. I am, because you actually dread the next thing coming out from the media, because that you're going to get inundated with the same questions, with the same the same panics, the same concerns. And that's the difference, when you put yourself above the parapet, like I've done, like Liam's done, you do grow, and there is a collective growing, isn't there, when you see something break, especially if you know that it's not reliable or it's not true.
Yeah, I think everybody's reading into the significance of everything. We've had this week, not only today, but earlier this week, we've had the sponsorship issue. We've spoken about that both separately. It was something that was sorted out a long time ago, and it's something that as soon as it happens, everybody thinks, right, the takeover's off. It was as much a deal breaker almost as Javier Manquillo getting a 3-year contract, or Andy Carroll signing an extension, or Steve Bruce potentially, if this drags on, signing a player this summer. Things have to go on. It has to be business as usual. And I actually take that as a positive. Always try and look at the positive things, but at least this lot who currently still own our football club see the need for it to continue, and things have to be happening. Players have to be signing deals. Players have to be signed. There has to be some kind of action taking place, and at least it is. At least it's happening. And we can take positives from that, because if I was always fearful, knowing how much Mike Ashley had switched off emotionally from the football club, that he wouldn't allow any decisions to be taken, that he would just totally wash his hands of it. And at least the people in charge are being allowed to run the football club. That's got to be a positive, because the football club still needs to exist. There still needs to be a club there to buy, because if it was allowed to float along with no players being signed or contracts not being signed, we'd be looking at relegation next season with absolute doubt. We may well still struggle, but that would certainly make it a lot harder for the manager, whoever it may be.
Yeah. Just while we're on, I have managed to get some copies now of my book, Every Boy's Dream, which Liam kindly reviewed in the Shields Gazette. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to give a copy away. So all you need to do to enter is like the video that you're watching on YouTube and give it a share, and I will pick a lucky winner, contact you, and post you the book out tomorrow. So if you can like the video and share, what I would also do is if you just put the word enter in there, and I'll basically select a winner tonight, and I'll contact you and post the book out. But yeah, it's finally got a few hard copies as well, which is great. B. Taylor says, Steve, could Mitch and Steve bring BZG back to the table again? Of course, we did talk about this on the Friday show with Steve Hasty and Neil Mitchell there, who of course had been involved with BZG, which was quite a long ongoing situation. They did say on Friday, though, sadly not. Although they did say they felt that Midhat might fancy another crack at it. So it'd be interesting to see whether they could resurrect things. Spenny Mag says, Janos, I trust our Liam, Chris and George. Keep up the good work and keep up the good writing, Liam. It is appreciated. Chris says, Bruce, not in my backyard. Rulidius says, Henry Mauriss looks like an American Mike Ashley. We don't want him at Newcastle. Colin says, I'd just like to thank Graham Souness. He's taken a year off my life. Silly me thinking I was at the Fairs Cup final in 1969 and not 1968. Thanks, Graham. Lee Martin says 70 million deposit was put down as well, wasn't it? Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing, isn't it? That, that PCP put £70 million down, into Mike Ashley's bank account. Of course, that's non-refundable.
Yeah, it's non-refundable. And it's the type of thing that it's where the Mauriss thing almost falls down in a lot of ways without knowing the full 100% detail, as nobody apart from the people involved in these bids and talks are. But he hasn't paid a deposit. He hasn't filed any kind of bid yet, as is to my knowledge. So to be honest, it is non-refundable. This is a deal that is 99% done. It is effectively just waiting on a yes or no, and then the transfer of funds, which I'm led to believe will probably take maybe the course of a week or so for it to happen. Might be as short as 3 or 4 days, just simply because of the transfer of funds across through different currencies, through different banks. But if the Premier League was suddenly to turn around and say yes tomorrow, we would probably have a new owner at the football club by this time next week. But again, it's a massive if whether they're going to say yes or no.
Yeah, current score in the Watford-Man City game is Watford 0, Manchester City 1. Lucas says, Mirror reporting that the takeover stalled indefinitely. Any truth in this? We'll cover it at the top of the show, Lucas, so you mustn't have seen it, but we don't believe that it's stalled. No, we believe that there will be an imminent announcement from the Premier League like everybody else. Adam Anderson says, truthfully, Steve, you still positive the takeover will go through? I've given up reading anything regarding the takeover for the last month. Yes, I am. And so is Liam. Paul Oxley says, did they not realise how many cans are going to go out of date if this takeover doesn't go through soon? Yeah, it seems a million years ago since hashtag cans was a thing on Twitter, doesn't it?
I've had far too many cans in that time, far too many.
Peter says he's had to restock weekly. John says Bruce is a yes man, which we can't disagree with, I don't think. Jason Carter says Bruce must write his press conference comments before the games. Sometimes what he says bears no relation or relevance to the display or the result. Oriental says Brucey loves the bacon. Spenny Mag says, going to Steve's tweets last night, I fully agree that Pete Graves should present Newcastle games with a player manager who hasn't got a grudge against the club. Someone like Rob Lee is a perfect example. Yeah, I mean, I probably gave Pete Graves a bit of a restless night last night with that tweet because there was a lot of traction on it. But I was being serious, just a little bit of research or a little chat with with regards to who covers Newcastle games would help, because even since you go back to the days of Vic Wakeland, who owned Sky, and the entertainers, it pulled in a lot of viewing figures for Sky because of Newcastle's being everyone's second team at that particular time. So obviously we are box office. We do get, whether we're struggling, whether we're doing well or not, we always get a lot of people watching us. So why did I have people on there who are going to annoy Newcastle fans? Why did I have people who are so, the history isn't a great one with Newcastle? Souness, what not loved amongst the fans? Do you know what I mean? Kieran Dyer wasn't a club favourite. I always say that with regards to Kieran Dyer, he only looked good when Newcastle were struggling. That's when he started to look a player, But yeah, it's a strange one, isn't it?
No, I think it is really strange. On Dyer, I actually quite liked him as a player. I like his pace, I like his Dyer at running. But he was just always injured. And to be honest, his time at Newcastle United is always tarnished with the Bobby Robson exit. And I think there's a few other players at the football club are tarnished with that one. So I think it is a bit of an insult to have someone like Dyer on. And to be honest, before I go into his comments, every time he said gaffer to Souness, to me, that was just cringeworthy. It really was. It was embarrassing, I thought. But his comments themselves, it's almost like he's decided already before he's gone on there exactly what he's going to say. And Souness is the same. I actually think Souness is a decent pundit. He's not the worst out there. He's all right. But I think punditry in general is struggling. There aren't that many good ones out there. And I think they're scraping the barrel to get people in, having so many games covered live, to get the right kind of people in. And Dyer sort of fits into that category. He wouldn't be in the top 100 people probably they'd invite to cover a game on Sky Sports. But like I said, they've had virtually every game on, so some people just won't be available, or they're just probably trying to mix it up. His grasp on what Newcastle United is now compared to what Newcastle United was when he was up here was totally off. There was no real grasp on what Newcastle United have done this season. There was no real grasp on the feeling towards Steve Bruce. There was obviously no idea. I didn't listen to Souness. I know he's watched Newcastle a few times this season, but listening to him and Dyer, it didn't look like there were pundits who particularly paid any attention to the way Newcastle United have played. Because like I said, you don't really have to go back that far. It's lazy to not look back to somewhere like January and just see how bad Newcastle United were. They played three games. I don't think St James's Park has seen a goal with fans there since the start of January. I'm sure it was right at the start of January. It was probably that Chelsea game. And when you look at that, that tells its own story. Yes, fans haven't been there since March, but it was 6 weeks before that. We had 3-0 draws at St James's Park. It was awful.
Yeah.
And then to suddenly turn around and say, Steve Bruce, excellent job, fantastic. Like Steve McManaman the other week. It's just, again, it's pathetic. It's just lazy. It doesn't take anything. If I was going to go on the telly and talk about Chelsea, or I was going to go on the telly and talk about Leicester, the first thing I would do in the run-up to that is make sure I know what I'm talking about. Suss out what the fans are saying, even if you haven't got the time to watch over the last 10 games. Just see what the general mood is. There are some people like that who really do get it. It's Jake Humphries, isn't it? Jake Humphries always comes out with fantastic stuff on BT. And there's a few others as well. They're not alone. But there's some really bad stuff. And I do wonder, we pick up on the Newcastle United stuff, how bad the comments on Newcastle United are. But I wonder if fans across the country are saying exactly the same thing. Is it the case that these pundits are going on and just haven't got a clue and are just living off the fact that they've got a really good name in football as to why they get these jobs and are employed in the punditry game? And I do wonder that there could have been fans from the opposition last night saying, Jesus, what are they talking about? But I don't know. I found it really painful to watch. And it was almost disrespectful to Newcastle United fans to have two people who are one who was really disliked because he took over an empire and broke it up. And I'm talking about Souness there because he was presented the crown jewels. Newcastle United were a really good side under Bobby Robson. Yes, the wheels came off a little bit towards the end, but he's not well liked by Newcastle fans at all. And like you say, Kieran Dyer was a controversial figure even when he was at his very best on Tyneside.
Yeah, it's not even balanced. I mean, you should go back to the old days of having somebody from Brighton and somebody from Newcastle, and not two people from the same football club either. It's you're not getting a balanced view. They should have had a Brighton legend on and a Newcastle legend, and as you say, they should mix it up. There's Rob Lee, there's Steve Howie, you know, who are both very prominent, both capable of doing TV work, and both could be used. And we've seen a whole host of people who've come on and done the live chats with me over the course of lockdown. You know, Lee Clark would be great. You know, these people should be given the opportunity to go and sit on the couch, and they should have almost like a set 11 that they use, you know, throughout the year. But, you know, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Chris asks you a question. He says, what do your friends and family in Saudi say about the takeover latest? Appreciate the perspective.
If you're talking about the latest today, I'll be honest with you, it was breaking just as we were coming on air, wasn't it, Steve? So I haven't had a lot of chance to speak to people across there recently. But there is, speaking to somebody, I was speaking to somebody 2 days ago, and there remains a confidence. There remains a confidence that everything they're doing is right and just. And I think there would be a real sense of injustice from people within the kingdom were this not given the green light by the Premier League. But there's little more I can say on it than that. There is a confidence. Ultimately, the question you've got to ask yourself, and I can only present with what I'm told and facts, is you've got to ask yourself, how confident are you in the buyer's confidence? Because they've remained confident throughout this process. And yes, of course, you have to doubt it, but there's a reason for that confidence as well. So it's a double-edged sword.
2-0 to Man City. We've got Sterling penalty now. So Watford still very much in that relegation mix, depending on how the other results go.
Steve as well.
Absolutely crazy, mate. 3 managers in the space of a season. It's never been known. But whatever Nigel Pearson has done or said, obviously hasn't gone down well with the owner. And what a crazy time to do it. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah, they've got, like, obviously tonight, and then they've got a difficult game at the weekend as well. It just puts them in a really difficult position. Yeah. Realistically, even if you didn't like the manager, he's taken them from certainties to go down to having their head above water with 2 games to play. You've got to give him credit in some sense, even if you don't like him, unless he's done something that obviously breaches any kind of disciplinary procedure that they have in the football.
Yes, people are suggesting, but it's all rumours and counter rumours at the minute. Nobody really knows why he's been sacked.
Yeah, and I think unless it was something like that, then I probably would have given it to the end of the season. And then you can always say when he's kept you up, which he probably would have, you say thanks but no thanks. You've done the job. Obviously, there's been issues. See you later. And I think that would have been a more respectful way of doing it.
Had confirmation from Ian Mearns, the MP for Gateshead, who I had on the show on Friday, that he has written a letter to Richard Masters. So I'm going to get Ian on the show later this week with the Geordie dentist and with Steve on Friday to discuss that. But I'm sure that Ian will be sticking that up on his social media at some point. Life Goal says, do you believe Newcastle can aim for the top 6 next season after takeover? They need a new 5-6 players, improve facilities, and you believe the PIF would regenerate the Tyneside area as part of the takeover? Yeah, I mean, I think we could. It's just, you know, if we get, you know, the kind of money we're expecting to come in with a new takeover, then, you know, the world is our oyster. But I think it'll be a long-term plan, won't it, Liam? Not a quick fix.
Yeah, very much so. And I think there's been a lot of frustration kicking around with the idea that FFP would be sort of relaxed this season, and it looks, given timeframes, that Newcastle United might not be able to take full advantage of that should they be taken over by the Saudis. But I'm led to believe that it would be a little more of a slow burner. We've also got to remember, everyone talks about, Newcastle United's new owner is going to do a Man City. But it took Man City 4 or 5 years before they actually won a trophy. It was also a build there. It wasn't immediate success. So any process like this, Newcastle are starting from a solid enough base, but quite a low base. And I think the first steps that any new owner can take is provide enough quality within the team, managerial front, etc., to build get this team up the division. I don't think the first step's the hardest step. I think you've seen teams like Sheffield United, seen teams like Wolves have been able to take quite solid steps in the Premier League. They haven't come up and fought for their lives. They've actually come up and competed in the top half of the table. And I believe moving Newcastle United from 13th or 14th up to 7th or 8th isn't a massive step. And that's something that can be really done quite easily. With the right manager and with the right players brought in. The next step beyond that, probably from about 6 to 4-3, is quite a considerable step. And I think that's the thing that would probably take a little bit of time. But answering that question with regards, Do PIF have any ideas on regeneration of Tyneside? This is something that very much falls in the idea with the consortium. There are links to the Rubens. The Rubens have a lot of vested interest in Newcastle, and I spoke to somebody close to the deal first in January and then onwards since. And there were teams within the Rubens already putting together a package, certain things to present were the Premier League to give the green light. And I believe that there are big plans. And that's one thing that makes me really positive about this deal, is that Tyneside, for me, I love North Tyneside, South Tyneside, Newcastle. I love this area, and nothing would make me happier than to see new owners come in and just put a bit back in, and put a bit back into the community. Because this area for so long has been forgotten by governments. We've all felt it. We've all felt it through the decades. And just to see somebody come in and actually care about us would be a massive thing. And it would be such an easy win for a new owner as well to come in. I'm not talking about training grounds. I'm not talking about, in particular, extensions of the stadium, albeit they would be absolutely fantastic. I think easy wins for any new owner is just to really bring this football club back from the Mike Ashley stagnation, to put it back right at the heart of the people of Newcastle in the area. It hasn't been that for a long time. It was that before, although it had its moments as well under previous ownership. But to put this football club back where it belongs, in the heart of the community, with the people of Newcastle and the surrounding areas, will be something that I do envisage the Rubens, PIF and PCP would do should they be given the green light.
Yeah, Derek Sharp says PIF know they have a strong case against the Premier League, and could Qatar be promising Masters that they will pay the legal bill? GV Games, what did he say? He used to pop up with goals about Olivier Bernard. Stephen Parker, Reuben brothers have excellent knowledge and contacts. To me, it's a dream come true for Newcastle and Newcastle United. And Dave Little says, is it a case the takeover will go ahead, but it could be another 6 months? I can't see it being another 6 months. I think we're reaching the end game now, aren't we?
Everybody wants a decision. Like I said, the buyers want a decision. The seller desperately wants a decision. He wants to give this football club up and move on. He doesn't want to have to be putting together these plans or allowing Lee Charnley, who didn't expect to be at the football club now. He didn't expect to be here in June, never mind heading into August. So these people have already accepted their fate, did a long time ago, and it's almost just dragging it out. We've just got to hope, as we've spoken about before, that it is the correct decision that the Premier League come to. And I do believe that they will. I don't know that they will, but I do believe it, as you've said as well, Steve.
Yeah, a few texts coming in about Joe Linton, of course, who was on the scoring trail, according to last night's television coverage. Two wonderful goals in 37 games. I mean, let's hope that it's as prolific next season.
Well, yeah, if there is a next season.
Kieran Bauer says, what are your thoughts on Andrew Davies' tweet last night? Andrew's a nice lad. He's not in the know, and he's probably had a message from somebody. Who that is, God knows, but I would take it with a pinch of salt, is probably the politest way that I could say that. Josh says, we have to understand the difference. This is a country buying into the Premier League. Mansour was a personal purchase of City, later adopted by Abu Dhabi. Comparing it would be the same as MBS rather than PIF, which is a good point. Lots of banter going on between different people on here. Baggage comes with a country like Saudi Arabia. We just need to be patient. It would never be plain sailing. That's fair enough. Paul says, why couldn't the Reuben brothers buy Newcastle on their own? It's a good point. They've got a lot of money, and Amanda may have a lot of money come the end of this court case in October.
I just don't believe that that's something they want to do, and that's okay. These people have made a lot of money doing what they do, and they might not want to spend it on a football club. They might want to have a vested interest in a city where they are expanding their own empire. But running a football club is very different. It takes a lot of different skills. And I think that's where PCP really come into their own. They've done their due diligence. They've spoken to a lot of people, got involved with fan groups, local government, and I think they know what they want from the football club and how to run it. And I think they'll put the right people in place. The Reubens I don't think they particularly want that on their shoulders, and that's fair enough, to be honest. Although we've all seen the rich lists. I think if they did buy Newcastle United with Amanda, they'd probably be is it the second richest owners in the Premier League outright? It's incredible, really. And it's incredible to be talking about that kind of riches coming into Newcastle United. Now, we've heard before about Mike Ashley, after those famous comments about his wallpaper. Well, again, we're talking about the Rubens on sitting there with 18 billion quid sitting, not in that cupboard. It's not pouring out every time they get their coat out. It is in investments. It is in real estate and a number of other things. But these are people with serious money. And the Saudis, if they've got serious money, I speak to a lot of people. I've really engulfed myself in the idea of getting to know the culture, the business culture in the Middle East and Saudi Arabia. And one thing that was made quite clear to me was when they put these rich lists together, etc., a lot of people don't actually know in Saudi Arabia, these rich people, exactly how much money they have, because the money is just pouring out of the ground, literally. They don't know how much money they've got, so it's purely estimates. So even when you put MBS, PIF, etc., up where they are, I think it's even more. I don't think it's even close. And I'm not saying that to mean to get Newcastle United fans excited. It is just naturally reality. And I would suspect that these people won't want to pour all of that kind of cash into Newcastle United. But it would be nice to have an owner who did put a little bit in, just to supplement what we put in through buying shirts, buying season tickets. It'd be nice to have somebody who cared. And I think if that money was spent correctly, the money that we put in, and a little bit supplemented by an owner who cared, then I think this club could go places. I really believe that, because we know it. There's a lot of people out there doubt it, but we know how unique this football club is. A lot of people might say that about their own football clubs, but I genuinely believe that when Newcastle United, and if things start going in the right direction, this could really take off. And I think we all have that within our hearts. It's something I've always held, even in the darkest days, that our day in the sun will come. I still believe it will. Fingers crossed it's sooner rather than later, because a lot of people out there are getting pretty sick, but it will. It'll come. I have that firm belief. We've always known it, and I think it will come. It will.
B. Taylor says, genuine question, is the club hamstrung with regards to transfers because we're in the middle of a takeover? I mean, it's an interesting question, Liam. We're getting linked with lots of players, Ronaldo included. What's your thoughts on that?
So obviously this summer there's been two types of rumour. There's been the types of rumour where you've got agents from certain players who are pining for a move. One I'll point towards in particular is Koulibaly, who's at Napoli. He's actually a player that Rafa Benitez signed for Napoli. He's been a good centre-half there, but he's been a player that's been touted around Europe for a number of Premier League clubs as well, lower down the spectrum. West Ham's, these type of clubs. Norwich, I think, were even linked with him at one point. But he's on a lot of money, and his agent's touting around to get him out. Nobody's bitten on that deal. But that's the type of player Newcastle have been linked with the idea a takeover does go through. A lot of it's agents talk, and I think everyone out there does exactly as I do. You treat it with a pinch of salt. But there is work going on. Newcastle United will sign footballers this summer, whether a takeover goes through or not. And I'm not going to say they're going to be world-beaten footballers such as Philippe Coutinho or whoever has been linked in recent weeks. But they will sign players, and I'm not going to reveal anything now, but I've had a couple of names put to me that I believe would be incredible signings, and these are signings that are being looked into, provided a takeover doesn't go through. So I do think there will be movement. There is a budget there. It isn't going to be the budget that Steve Bruce said on Saturday. It isn't going to be the budget he thought it was going to be. But there is a budget there to sign players. Whether we go out and see Newcastle United spend major cash like they did last summer on footballers, I'm still not convinced that they will. But I do believe that they'll try, as many clubs will, to use the free agent market reasonably well. There are players there that will command large signing on fees and large wages, but you can get players on relatively low, for a low outlay. And I also believe that they're going to use the loan market. Now, that might not fill anybody with excitement because we've had a real mixed bag, but in a football economy where it's going to be depressed, the loan market is something that a lot of clubs are going to operate in. And one player in particular, again, I'm like in the know here, aren't I? Sort of half giving something away. But there are a couple of players, one in particular, who, if Newcastle had signed him, the fans can can get really excited about. Don't worry, I'll write it. It'll be out there before the weekend.
Good. Do you think the media see Newcastle as a cosy club, always in the press for the wrong reasons, or the odd good story and the thought of us becoming giant terrifies them? So you can answer that.
I don't think anybody's particularly terrified Newcastle United, but I think there are certain clubs who've made their feelings known to the Premier League recently and during this process that I think have got agendas. I don't think they're 100% confident and sure that their club can stand up to a strong Newcastle United. So if that's fear, that's what you're going to call it, then maybe there is. But I don't think the media in particular have a fear of Newcastle United becoming strong, because I think the media in general, bar certain agenda journalists, reflect on Newcastle United really positively. You only have to look, for example, say somebody like Henry Winter and the really positive things he says about Newcastle United. Newcastle as a city, he's on the national agenda. For every Henry Winter, there's a negative one as well. I don't think there's a particular agenda against Newcastle United. And I think, like I say, there's a lot of people say a lot of positive things about this city and about the football club, because, like you say, you've went through it before. The Entertainers were everybody's second favourite team. Brought a lot of people on board. It was like a movement. It was a feeling in that mid-90s, and it became some young people's first team, even if they're not from the area. And we're still seeing that now. There's Newcastle United fans all over the shop. It'd be nice to think that something like that could happen again, because I do believe it will. I think it will, because Newcastle United is too big a football club, too big a city with too big a feeling to not be successful again. I'm starting to sound like Jimmy Neal and Big River here, aren't I? Shall I start singing it?
Yeah. In your woman's voice, Lillian. Life goals. Liam, why don't the club make Woodman number one next season and try to get him on a long contract? Dubravka's decent, but it mirrors the Tim Flower Shea given situation at Blackburn. Some people agreeing. Woodman's dad's an ex-pro. I forget who he is. Sam Robson says, life goals, are you mad? We'll be relegated without doubt. GV Game says he looks a good keeper. So it's all about opinions. But would you shift Dubravka out of the number one slot?
No, I don't think I would. I think you mentioned it last night in our blog. I think if Dubravka hadn't been between the sticks for Newcastle this season, you probably could be looking at relegation, because he's been a fantastic goalkeeper. He's had a lot to do. He's been the most active goalkeeper in the Premier League, and that shows by the amount of saves that he's made. Yes, he makes the odd mistake. He's not perfect, but you only have to look at someone like David De Gea, for example, who makes mistakes. They all do. They all make mistakes. Thibaut Courtois went to Real Madrid. He's the best goalkeeper in La Liga now. He was iffy. He was iffy at times in the Premier League, and he was iffy when he first went to Real Madrid. So they all have problems. I'm not putting Martin Dubravka in that category, but I believe for Newcastle United, even if this club was to grow under new ownership, I do believe Martin Dubravka is more than able of being Newcastle United's goalkeeper for a number of years. On the Freddie Woodman situation, for me, I think it's been really, really, really badly managed by Newcastle United. I think you've got a young, ambitious player there who essentially wants to play games, whoever that may be for. And there were contractual problems under Rafa Benitez when it wasn't anything to do with Rafa, but he was fighting Woodman's corner and going between the owners, and it was really, really messy. And I think it was those issues that probably made the mind up of Freddie Woodman long term that he would be a goalkeeper elsewhere, and he wouldn't probably spend a long time at Newcastle United. So I think that ship sailed. I think a couple of years ago, if you'd tried to make that decision and promised that to a Freddie Woodman, saying, right, we're going to sign a keeper, but in 2 years' time, we want you to prove in a summer that you're better than him and you'll be the number one, I think he would have dived at that. But that was never presented, I'm led to believe, to Woodman. And I think it would be no shock to see him leave. I could be totally wrong. Things may have changed. It's been a little while since I've explored that situation. But I would be surprised if Freddie Woodman is a Newcastle United goalkeeper long term.
Yeah, true. Kieran Bauer says 360 have just tweeted piracy questions were answered and finished a month ago. What is happening? Yeah, you've got to remember that NUFC 360, good lads, don't get us wrong, but it's just a Twitter account that basically sends out stuff that's being put up on other media networks. They don't come up, they don't research their own stuff. They literally just sit and get NUFC links from other places, retweet them. That's it. That's what they do. Got a huge following, which always surprises me, but all they do is regurgitate what other people put out there. So don't get too excited about that. Jason says, great show as always, Steve. Looking forward to reading your book. Thank you. GV Game says, De Gea was terrible for a while. He was being labelled a flop. Not anymore. There's Dubravka arguments going on. Dubravka is the best in the world, Liam, says Kira. Paul Oxley, Liam, are we linked with a good striker? How's the bacon for yes or hold the cans for no? I mean, yeah, the worst thing about Steve Bruce's interview last night was that he was saying, well, we might be looking for a striker, but it's, it just didn't really sound as if it was his main aim,
Yeah, I think the club are very much looking for a striker. They do realise that the main problem, if they hadn't pulled a rabbit out of the hat in Alan St. Maximin and had other players that Rafa Benitez established in the side, your Dubravkas, your Lascelles, others such as John Joe Shelby at times as well has pulled them out of the crap at times. But I think realistically, I think they probably will sign a striker. The ones I've been told will excite, but whether they're good players or not, I'm not an expert on the leagues that they've played in. I'm not going to give any more away than that. So to be honest, it could be a go or it could be an issue. But you've got to pull a rabbit out the hat. You're going to sign a player. They did that with St. Maximin. They failed with Joe Linton. They've got a very checkered record when it comes to signing players under this current regime and the one previously under Graham Carr. They had a few successes, Sissoko's, Kabai's, a number of others, but they had a lot of failures as well, your Rivier's, plenty of others. We're going to all name them. So I think you've got to get it right, and I think it's going to be a key summer if this takeover isn't put through or we still remain in limbo. I think it's a big stummer for Steve Bruce because he really needs to tackle that centre-forward position. We've seen a player in Dwight Gale, who probably wouldn't get a game for most other Premier League sides. He comes into the Newcastle side and ultimately changes the dynamic of that front line because he's a striker who knows where to be. He's got the instinct. He can't always finish, as we've seen, but he's a proper striker. And I think if Newcastle United can get an upgrade on that type of player to lead the line, then they'll have done really well. But there are a lot of teams looking for that type of player. They're not the type that come cheap, and they're not the type that are often available. We've seen plenty. You see, just look at the players that West Ham signed last summer. They didn't all work. Then you go to Southampton and you see Danny Ings work perfectly. You've got to hit it right. You've got to pick the right player. And Newcastle United just got it wrong with Joe Linton last year. They did. If they were looking for a striker, he wasn't your striker. If they were looking for a lad, a physical presence who might play off a striker, then yeah, he's probably the type you would have said if you were going to play that system. But that's not the system they played. They've almost had to shoehorn him into a position towards the end of the season that he wasn't signed for. And if you paid £40 million for a winger like Joe Linton, it would be even more of a failure than what it probably has been. And that's ultimately what he's probably going to be at Newcastle United. So they need to get it right. They have to address that situation. For me, they have to address a number of other places. The fullbacks aren't right. I thought the centre half was probably the strongest position Newcastle United had this time last year. I'm not sure in a 4 at the back, which is what Steve Bruce, let's continue talking about as if it's Steve Bruce. I don't think there are enough central defenders in that crop who are natural central defenders in a 4. Jamal Lascelles is one, Kieran Clark is another one, Federico Fernandez. Florian Lejeune isn't, not for me, and Fabian Shaw, although I like both players in certain ways, he doesn't fit the bill either. Neither probably does Paul Dummett. Paul Dummett's perfect in a back line with a 3, that left-sided player where Danny Rose played yesterday. Is he probably good enough to start in a Premier League side as a centre-half or a left-back? Then again, you'd probably say no. So for me, that's an area that would need strengthening. I wouldn't bother with touching the goalkeeper because, like I say, I think he's good enough and they can definitely rely on him. But midfield's an issue. Bentaleb, for me, is not up to scratch. He's no better than what the football club's already got. You wouldn't sign him. I wouldn't even go near him, not the money that he's on anyway. Beyond that...
What about Lazaro? Life goals is question there. He's had a lack of games. Seems peculiar. Obviously a talented winger. Doesn't look as if he's got much hope of staying if Steve Bruce is going to be still there in the next few weeks.
No, it's interesting. I think for me, I was on the Gazette's podcast this morning talking about Lazaro, and for me, he's a player that I get the sense from speaking to people in and around him that I don't think Newcastle United was a club that he was 100% sold on signing for in the first place. And I do believe that the takeover talk almost painted a picture for him that he really he actually thought, well, actually, I do fancy this. And then with that dying off a little bit, or stalling, sorry, I think that desire's gone. I think he's been a little bit angered by the lack of games under Steve Bruce. I think he feels that he could have got a little bit more time on the pitch, a couple more starts. But what I would say is that Steve Bruce has had him long enough. You've got to trust his judgment in some ways. He's had him long enough on the training pitch. And he threw the idea that he couldn't pick him because the team was playing so well recently. Well, I'm putting myself in Steve Bruce's shoes. If I think I've got a special lad who I can't get in the side because we are playing well, which is fair enough, I'm going to give him more time than what Steve Bruce has given him, where he's throwing him on for 4 minutes at the end or 12 minutes here or whatever. I'm going to at least give him a couple of starts in games that mean little. Especially yesterday, for example, he would have started for me. Matty Longstaff would have started. I probably would have even started Callum Watts, but I'm not there. I'm not at the training ground every day, and I don't see these lads. I only see what I've seen them play for the 23s, of course, and I've seen Longstaff for the first team. But you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I would never ever want them to throw young kids in for the sake of throwing young kids in, because realistically, if they're not good enough, they're not good enough. But it was the perfect opportunity yesterday to try something like that, and there was no desire. And I think really that spells the end for Matty Longstaff, and it spells the end for Valentino Lazaro as well.
Yeah, I would agree. Thanks for your comments. He says, SJJ, these shows have been fantastic. Only things kept me sane over the takeover period. I've struggled with fan-based Twitter sites, if I'm honest. Panic button pressed too easily. Thanks, mate. Live goals, front four of ASM, Richarlison out wide, Rondon in the middle, and Almiron, number 10, would be very good. Javier Mascherano still playing, albeit 36-year-old, maybe not Premiership standard. Danielle's asking what your kind of choice is, Liam.
Oh, all sorts. Honestly, I'm not that fussy. I'm really not. I do enjoy a nice. I do enjoy a nice can of Stella. Like that's my turn to eye. It's got a bad name, but I think it's not a bad tip of a night time, mate.
I had to read this twice because I followed Danielle's comment. I thought Jason was asking you about Rosie. Then I realised it was Rose. I'm not sure about his motives, but he doesn't seem genuine yet. Rose really. I've got to be honest, that altercation, whether it was his fault or not on the train with Newcastle fans, I think for me, I just thought he's not going to last at the club. Like, you know what I mean? There's something about the whole Danny Rose thing that doesn't look right. And I always say that if a club like Spurs is prepared to let a player go, then, you know, it always casts a doubt on why.
Yeah, there were issues there. There were issues at Spurs. They've been well documented. For me, I slightly disagree. I think he's been all right. I think he's been decent after almost the break allowed him to catch up physically with everybody else because he hadn't played a lot of games. It was a leveler almost, the little break that we had during the season. And I think he's come back better. You've seen the comments there, they're wanting 15 million for him. You wouldn't pay 15 million for him, would you? But if he's available at 4 or 5 million, I think they would go for it. And I think he's a player that Steve Bruce would like to sign permanently. He's an experienced player. He's not the player we all know from 3 or 4 years ago who was at Maraude left back in that fantastic Spurs side under Pochettino. But he's a good, solid performer. He wants to sign for Newcastle United. Interestingly, though, with Leeds coming up and being where he's from Yorkshire, be interested to see whether they quite fancy a little nibble at Danny Rose if the fee's right. Because they're going to need to having been out of the division for so long, they're going to need to bring little bits of Premier League experience into the side. And he's a type that you would look at to say he's from the area. Will he sign? Yeah, he probably will. And can we get him for a good price? So I wouldn't rule out something like that if Newcastle United don't bite. Yeah,
John Stone's on loan. Derek Sharp says a lot of people shouting that they'd like to see Jetro Williams back. I'd let the loan signings go. Rose is average, not better than the lad Willems. Hopefully he gets back through his injury. Aaron Gallagher asking again with PCP Bidfield, will they sue the Premier League? You'd imagine so if they've got grounds to. Paul Oxley says Leeds can have Joe Linton if they want. We've run right over, mate, but obviously because we've got so many questions in, and I know you didn't mind going over a little bit. Lots of comments. Thanks everybody for chipping in. Happy to have you on again next week, mate, and we'll definitely have a takeover special should it go through at the weekend, mate. So we'll keep in touch. But Liam, thanks for tuning in tonight. You can follow Liam on Twitter and obviously get onto the Shields Gazette website to read all of Liam's comments about different things regarding Newcastle United each day. But Liam, thanks very much for coming on, mate.
No, it's been a pleasure, and I'll put the rosé and the Prosecco on ice.
Good stuff, mate. Take care. Speak to you soon. Great to have Liam on. I'm back tomorrow with Archie Goulet. That'll be a pre-record. The next live one, of course, will be Friday with the Geordie Dentist and with Steve Hasty, and then back with Lee Clark again on Saturday. But thanks for tuning in. Give it a share, give it a like, and I'll pick the competition winner when I go off air. Thanks very much, guys.